if you think about the way the world's thought about strategy for a long time, the holy grail, the thing we were all supposed to be driving was the notion of sustainable competitive advantage. And yet, when I look at how more and more of our economy operates, that's just not realistic. And in fact, I argue it's dangerous, that what it causes you to do is react with all the wrong reflexes and behave in a way that's not good for your organization's long-term survival. Control over resources. The typical way big companies do it is the people in the big profit and loss making businesses who make a lot of the money get to decide where it gets spent. Wrong. If their advantage declines, their instincts are to defend it rather than take that money and put it into discovering something new. And here in Canada, BlackBerry would be a brilliant example of this. How much money have they spent trying to claw their way back into what is now being seen pretty much as a lost cause? So the difference in the way I'm encouraging people to think about strategy versus the way we've historically done it is, historically we always treated industries as though they were this monolithic thing, and your most important competitors were other companies within your industry. So if you were General Electric, you benchmarked yourself against Westinghouse and so forth. In today's environment, what we're seeing is the most significant competition that a company faces is often not even from their own industry. It's from some other industry coming in and eating your lunch. So, ask anybody who's in television broadcasting, ask anybody who's in the news, who knew technology companies were going to come along and completely destabilize that space. I think the good news for smaller businesses and startups is that when the big guys can't hang on to an advantage the way that they used to, that creates a lot more openings. So I talk a lot about, if you're a small company, what should you be looking for? Well, look for a great big industry with lots of profits, where the business model hasn't changed in decades, preferably, where all the senior leaders in place have only known that business, where their mode is defense, and where their customers aren't happy. I like to use the phrase, you don't have customers, you have hostages. Something like the big payment schemes, Visa, MasterCard, those guys, $55 billion in interchange fees. And as we're all using cash less and using credit cards and other payment forms more, that's really starting to hurt the small merchants. And so I think there's going to be an explosion of innovation. You can already see it in that whole payment space, and those big companies aren't going to be able to hang on to those advantages for very much longer. So one of the things I think that's important if you want to build a pipeline of competitive advantages, which is really what my book's talking about, which is you need to be managing the innovation process, so that's where new advantages come from. You need to be good at exploitation. That's where systems and rigor and being very disciplined comes into play. And you need to be good at disengaging. And what I think is important for smaller business people to realize is they may not have the skills to be fantastic at each of those stages. So you might need to bring in a partner, bring in a helper, bring in someone with some outside perspective. Because the wild and crazy guy who's going to come up with the next generation, I don't know, voice recognition enabled software app is not necessarily the guy who's going to scale that thing and make it a national product, is not necessarily the same person who's going to say, its time has come and gone. So I think it's important to be humble as the leader of a small firm, that you may need help. You may need to reach out to someone who's got different instincts than you do to manage these pipelines of competitive advantage. For an entrepreneur to really take advantage of this, I think the critical thing is to get a vantage point. You need to get away from the grit and the dust and the emails of the business to take that big step back and see what's really going on. So I would say, get your own personal board of directors, get someone who can be candid with you, and make that time to see what's really happening. Because if you're in the wave itself, it's very difficult to see where the next one's coming from.